We've got the audience joining us. Thank you all for dialing into the Chang Robotics webinar. I'm Robert Sterling. We've got Matt Chang and a number of really special guests joining us. We're going to talk about some of the trends that these CEOs, these leaders, these engineers are seeing in the world of business and manufacturing and energy. We've got Marc Manning, the CEO of Kodiak Tech, Kate McAfoose, the founder of Curabotics, and Paul Boynton, who leads GoEco. Matt, thank you for putting this together as well. Matt, if you don't mind, if you could give just a quick overview of Chang Robotics, as well as a real quick introduction to the CEOs we have here and the companies they lead. That'd be a great way to kick this off.
Super. Well, Chang Robotics is an engineering and robotics firm. The reason I start with engineering is I don't think you can actually deploy robotics without doing the engineering first. So that'd be kind of a misnomer in the industry. But what we really focus on is deploying advanced robotics into the workforce. And we do it in a variety of industries. Kind of our bread and butter is industrial and manufacturing. You know, that's a big theme today, made in USA. And then we do it in healthcare. So we're going to talk a lot about that. And we also do it in industrial and government settings. So we'll touch on that today. Our bias is always worker-friendly autonomous robotics. So we kind of always start there, and then we add on the additional systems that may be required. If it's power or utilities or traditional automation and software layers, those come wrapped around the autonomous package. So yeah, let me take you around the horn on who we're going to meet today. So we're joined by some very high-powered guests, and it's really exciting. They're all Americans that are building American companies with American technology. So this is the Made in USA call. So starting first in our lineup is Kate McAfoose. Like me, Kate's a professional engineer, longtime executive in the robotics space, and she is the leader and co-founder of a company called Curabotics, which is doing robotics in hospitals. Next, we have Marc Manning, fellow Georgia Tech alumni like myself, back in the glory days before social media, of course. And Marc is a leader in developing zero emissions transportation. So he did some of his most famous deployments are Chicago and Los Angeles, which have huge electric systems for mass transit. But he's also set up global manufacturing for famous companies like Cummins. So a wealth of experience there. And then last and most in terms of experience would be Paul Boynton. Paul, his most recent corporate post was CEO of Rayonier and Rayonier Advanced Materials. He's deep in the science, deep in the ecology and the sustainability of products. And he's going to talk to us about how to make food safe using a breakthrough organic chemistry.
This is great, Matt. That's really helpful. Really privileged to have all of our guests joining us today. Let's kick it off with Marc Manning, the CEO of Kodiak Technology. And Marc, I've got to say, you've got a really exciting opportunity to talk about because what you're doing here touches on so many topics that we see in the economy right now, that we read about in the Wall Street Journal. Everything from clean energy, electric vehicles, domestic manufacturing, domestic supply chains. Could you quickly walk us through your background here and what it is you're doing at Kodiak Technologies?
Yeah, I can walk you through my background. Yeah, so first 9 years of my career, I worked for Cummins. I did combustion engineering is actually my background. So I always joke, whatever Volkswagen did bad, I did correctly. Supported Komatsu as the big industrial competitor in Case New Holland in the industrial segment while working for Cummins. Worked in Japan and worked, and then when my last job within Cummins was I was in charge of our 3.3-liter engine and helped put in manufacturing in India. Then I left there, went to Chicago Transit Authority, launched the first 2 New Flyer electric buses in the world, helped spearhead charging infrastructure development. So the 3105 from SAE is a charging standard that I helped work on and get deployed in the US for overhead charging. Then I was chief engineer of there and then chief engineer of LA Metro, two of the 3 largest transit agencies, helped plan and deploy all their infrastructure, about $1 billion in procurement when I was there. Then I left, I helped start the transportation decarbonization group for Jacobs, the #1 engineering company in the world. And then while doing that, I was actually doing the vehicle architecture for Kodiak Tech, and this is where I'm sitting at today. Kodiak Tech, as you mentioned, right? off-highway equipment, which I spent a large amount of my career for, right? It is, helping deploy new technology in the off-highway market in a public sector, which is airports, where there's funding, and obviously there's lots of Buy America requirements in transit that is easily applicable to the FAA side.
That's awesome. That's a fascinating background. So what was the inspiration here for producing an industrial electric vehicle? I know we're all
Well,
familiar with Tesla. We all think about maybe electric buses, but these larger industrial scale vehicles that you're designing and producing, what was the trend you saw or the theme you saw in the world where you thought we need to go pursue this at an industrial scale?
well, I mean, the beauty of this, right, is that we're taking the learnings from the heavy and medium duty from transit, right, and applying that to the industrial segment, right? The good part, yet again, is that this is a closed system, so it's easy to figure out charging infrastructure, the deployment. There's funding
Mhm.
related to help drive this change, which we're already cost effective without the incentives, but obviously the incentives make it even more cost effective for the clients in the public space, which makes
Right.
them more likely to deploy this.
That's really interesting. So I'm assuming if you look back on most of the electric vehicle industry, it's had this hyperbolic growth over the last 15 years. Where do you see industrial electric vehicles going over the next 5 to 10 years? What does the growth forecast look like based on your experience in the industry here?
I mean, for us, I mean, it's obviously, it's a pretty big market share for us. The beauty, yet again, for us is that because we are a niche product used in a certain time of year, right? Right now, a Cody, a snow removal equipment, it's used in the winter and shelved, right, during the summer. And so what we can do is we can actually be another asset to where we can provide portable power for emergency. We can do peak shaving. So the thing is, you're now buying an equipment that has multiple purposes, which can
Mhm.
help as airports grow and expand. As they're getting, some airports are expanding their operations. Some are going to more electrified air conditioning systems. Some are needing to support the rental car operations for electrification. So we help enable more of the decarbonization at the airports.
I got a
That's fascinating. Oh,
question,
go ahead, Matt.
Yeah.
Robert, if I can jump in.
Please.
So, Mark, we had a couple high-profile events, both in America and then most recently in London, where airports just went down. There was just no power. And you said your equipment can do portable power.
Correct.
Would that
Correct.
have been a solution for the airports to not lose power?
That would have definitely been a tool in the toolbox, because now, the one that's in Heathrow, right? I mean, it's not snowing in Heathrow right now. They have to have snow removal equipment. So our assets could have been used to keep some of the operations running, or a majority of the operations running, in the advent of no electrical, because from what I understood, they had a severe disruption in power.
Yeah, because I don't think you want to necessarily power everything. All the TV screens would be fine to go off. But if I'm a stranded passenger, I need the transit train to run so I can get out of the terminal. And I'd like it if the baggage claim was spinning so I could actually get my bag when I leave. So
Yep.
could you power those
Yeah.
systems?
Yeah, we can power anything we need to. We're fully exportable power, right? Just think of us as a portable power gen on wheels, right?
And then I
That's
have one
awesome.
nerd question. So you said you did the first electric buses in Chicago.
Correct.
Wasn't it cold?
Yes, it was very cold. So the key part of that is, well, we were using liquid cooled batteries, right, which helps maintain the life of the battery. Additionally, we were doing charging strategies that worked based off energy duty cycle. And then we had a diesel fired coolant heater just for in cabin heating. So
Yeah, and you said the charging that you developed for that was overhead. So on top of the bus?
So the first charging that if people are familiar with Navy Pier, if you go to Navy Pier, we have the overhead charging. That's the SAE 3105
How
dash one.
does the charger get down to the bus?
It's a pantograph. It's a pantograph that goes down and then basically hits some cross rails on the top of the bus.
So Robert, I'll pass it back to you, but to translate the word pantograph, he installed a robot charger. So I'm totally in love with this system already.
That's
All right,
fascinating.
back to you.
Well, and Mark, let's make sure we keep the cinema powered on too at the airport, because
Yeah,
got a
exactly.
lot of hungry people there.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. So, Mark, you mentioned something called Buy American. And for anybody dialing in who's not familiar with the Buy American Act, could you walk through what that is? Is this a formal, is it a law? Is it a regulation, a policy? Is it just kind of a guideline? How does it work as we think about things like Buy American?
I'm going to speak for the transit space, and it applies to other spaces too as well. So in order to buy anything with federal funds, right, in the public transit world, you had to have 70 to 80% Buy America components in the vehicle, right? So your engine, your axles, and your manufacturing had to be substantially done in America to be able to use the money, right? There's Buy America. Also, there's Buy America EV chargers, Buy America, all that. So the benefit of that, right, is if you want federal funds, you have to spend your money in America, which then obviously drives innovation, manufacturing, jobs, all of that stuff. If you use local money, you can use local money, which is your entity, right, wants to use their tax money or their fair revenue. They can buy non-Buy America equipment, right? But if you think about it, let's just say 100% of whatever your local tax money is going to is actually paying for 100% of a foreign asset, right? And foreign labor and probably foreign innovation, right? So it is very important in the concept, if you're trying to drive the right behavior, to go Buy America, even from your local money, right? I think you would probably prefer your local tax dollars, even if it's more expensive to buy in America, at least goes to employing people locally in your district.
Absolutely. That's really helpful. How far back does this go in the supply chain? So you mentioned 70 to 80%. Is that just the final assembly? Or are we talking about components here as well? Does it really
It's
take a full domestic supply chain, or is it just kind of the very last step that needs
It
to be
has to
based
be
here in America?
substantial transformation. Sometimes things do get shipped overseas from overseas. That's where, like battery cells and things like that, they're typically coming from a different country, and then the battery packaging is being done locally. Sometimes it's the full kit and caboodle, but most of the times it's a large amount of transformation has to happen here with labor and cost.
That kind of reminds me of those F-150s during COVID that were all parked in the parking lot because they didn't have computer chips from Taiwan, right? They were made in Detroit. They came off the line in Detroit, but then they parked because they're waiting on a one piece from a foreign entity. So is there, in this complex manufacturing, is there a way to totally avoid foreign purchases?
I think that's something that you'd have to look at, right? Both me and you, Matt, right? We spent time manufacturing overseas, right? Well, we spent all that time offshoring it. Now we need to probably onshore critical components. We had the same thing when I was in public transit. We got hit by COVID. We couldn't get parts either for the buses that were in service, or we couldn't get parts for buses that we were buying, from the manufacturer, right? And that, as you said, most of the time was electrical components that were being shipped from overseas. So we do need to look at it as a holistic. And I think, your supply chain resiliency impacts not only your sales, but also impacts, your service quality that you can provide your clients. Because at the end of the day, my experience as a fleet operator, right? If you provide great service and provide great communication, right? Okay, my part's going to be a week late or whatever. They tend to be okay with it, right? Or at least accepting of it.
Mark, that's really helpful. So as you use the word reshoring, as we think about reshoring, what does that process look like for a company like Kodiak, for a company that is benefiting from federal spending, that wants to produce here in America? Is it easy to build large vehicles here in America? Is there more infrastructure needed? As you look at the future of a company like Kodiak, what can our country do overall to make it easier for people like you, for builders like you, to produce here in America?
I think the key thing, right, is the fund. Like, I'll say the things that I would say would be funding, right? make it to where not only the technical innovation matters, but entice people to change the status quo, right?
Mm.
Most people, from my experience in fleets and operations, right, they don't want to go from a diesel to an electric, right? Because it's breaking the status quo right now, currently works, right? Incentivize people to make that innovative change, right? Not only sustainability goals, not only everything else. It's got to be both financial and I'll say the other intangibles, right? That people may or may not think. Everyone will agree if something is cost effective, right? No matter if you're a Democrat, Republican, whatever you're at, if it's cost effective, they want to go that route, right? Creates energy independence. But also, I would say the other thing is there is a lot of red tape to deploying some of these things, right? And anything we can do to get rid of that red tape, right? It takes red tape to get maybe some environmental clearances to put in charging infrastructure, right? That prevents EVs from being easily deployed. Sometimes it takes, in my experience, it took about a year for the federal government to get the money to the end user. So that's 1 year of delay on a product, right? And as an OEM, you can see there's been a few OEMs that have gone, not so, they're not doing well, bankrupt, whatever. That there's a few reasons that happened. They were completely vertically integrated when they probably shouldn't have been, right? And then obviously, if money is hard to get spent, right, and hard for the end user to spend it, then it just delays and makes the vertically integrated people spend and burn a lot of money when they could be building the product and delivering it to the client, right?
That makes a lot of sense. Last question here about domestic manufacturing. It sounds like there are hurdles to producing anything in America, but we're trying to move in the right direction. Are there things specific to electric vehicles that change the dynamic here? You always hear about things like the critical materials, battery materials, raw earth metals, or pardon me, rare earth minerals. Are there nuances here specific to your industry? And as we think about domestic manufacturing and reshoring, how do we address those specific challenges for electric vehicle production here in America?
Well, I think obviously we have to have good relationships with people that have these rare earth metals, other countries. We do have a domestic supply base that we need to make sure we can do the circular economy, right? Like I've, read somewhere where we had some refining, we can mine it here, but then we had to ship it back to China for refinery and then ship it back here, right? So we need to do everything probably more circular here. We got recycling. There's companies called, Redwood Materials that are recycling, and then you can reuse, then that goes back into the supply chain, right? That's going to be important. And then there's also secondary life usages for the batteries. That's going to be important. Obviously, shout out to my home state, Mississippi. Cummins and PACCAR are putting in a manufacturing plant there for a local battery plant there. So those are some of the things that can happen. And obviously for us, we have a lot of domestic supply base. I mean, our battery solutions, our drive motors and all that stuff are being manufactured in the US. And the reason the supply base is building here, right, is because there's Buy America requirements. I would say maybe a threat of tariffs before, but it just makes sense to do it, right?
I got a question before you go, Mark. So, you're building, where are you at in the build phase? Can I buy a Kodiak Tech right now?
Yes, you can buy a Kodiak Tech right now.
Okay. When can I go see one?
You can actually go see one. We'll have it on display at the end of April, April 28th, 27th through 29th at the Buffalo International Snow Symposium at Buffalo, New York. And if anybody has any questions on that, gladly shoot me a LinkedIn message or anybody on this, and we'll give you more details.
Very cool. And where did you do that assembly and manufacture of the vehicle?
So we assembled the vehicle in just in southern Idaho, and then we have done some of the integration outside of Detroit with Roush.
Oh, incredible. So it is truly American supply chain. Okay. Well, that's it for me. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Mark, this is great. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to Kate McAfoose with Curabotics. Kate, good to see you here. Appreciate your time.
Hey, Robert, thanks for having me.
This is great. If you don't mind, if you could give a quick 30-second overview of your background and what it is you and the Curabotics team are doing, that'd be a
Yeah,
great way to kick this off.
absolutely. So my background is civil engineering by school and trade. I spent a few years doing that, got my professional engineering license, and quickly decided I wanted to explore some other parts of the industry. So then I tried my hand at project management here in Jacksonville with a local design build company that's pretty well known. So I spent a number of years doing that, and from there, then got the opportunity to lead a team in deploying autonomous mobile robotics for a few manufacturing sites. And our team was successful in deploying the largest, we call them AMRs, autonomous mobile robots, the two largest fleets of those in the US at the time. And not only did we deploy those, but we integrated those with automated guided vehicles, or AGVs. And so we had two mixed fleets that were functioning to provide material handling and supply chain logistics in large manufacturing facilities. So that drove basically the Chang Robotics success in AMRs and mobile robotics. And from there, we decided we needed to explore some other industries and be impactful there.
That's fascinating. Matt, I'm starting to feel outnumbered by all the engineers here. So let's get some more finance people on the call next time just to balance it out.
We always have
But-
finance people.
That's true. Yeah.
If we're going to make it in America, we need these engineers.
There we go. All right. That's fair. No, okay. That's great. That's really helpful. So you mentioned the companies you've worked with that work in the healthcare industry and produce these AMRs. I'll ask you the same question I asked Mark. What was really the inspiration here? When you were working with these companies and you're looking at the world, you're looking at the economy, you're looking at the market, what was the problem that you saw that you thought we could really address this problem through automation and through robotics?
Yeah, so it's both an external and kind of an internal cause for myself and for others on this call. So I'll start with, the US ranks pretty low on a health quality scale as far as a developed nation. And there's a number of barriers. One of them being healthcare costs are usually pretty high. Matt and myself both have households that are above the average from an American household. We just have lots of kids running around. And so taking care of those kids and making sure they're healthy is costly. But we are lucky that we live in an area where we have good access to healthcare. There's a lot of areas in the US where it's really restrictive, or it's really hard to even get access or get transportation to a care facility where they can get reliable care for whatever the conditions may be. And then on top of that, more internal to me, and I think Matt has the same situation, is my mom is a nurse. She's a registered nurse. She's been a nurse her entire life. And she's gone through the pains of aging population, COVID, you name it. And she's still out there working. We're begging her to retire because we're kind of tired of seeing her being tired. And she's at the age where she should get to relax, but she's just got a heart for providing care. And so it's then really hard to watch her get run down day in and day out and work so hard to make sure that her patients are taken care of. And so those were reasons we thought, we have these automation capabilities and we know how to deploy them in certain industries. We should be able to do it for hospitals. So we should be able to provide better care to the patients and better outcomes for them, as well as benefits for the providers.
That's really interesting. So, Kate, you mentioned these areas of the country where they lack medical care. I grew up in a small town, and a few years ago, the hospital there just shut down.
Right.
And you mentioned your mom who works in the nursing industry. Is there a trend across the board here of not enough nurses or not enough medical professionals in general? And if so, is it widespread? How do we address it? I mean, I keep hearing about it, but what's actually going on with labor issues in the healthcare industry right now?
Yeah, there's a couple causes. One is, we mentioned COVID. There was a mass exodus within the healthcare industry, probably within the year or two following COVID, right? The nurses were all very focused, or care providers in general were very focused on taking care of all those patients. Hospitals were inundated, senior living communities were inundated. They had beds out in hallways wherever they could provide them. So those care providers were, through their Hippocratic oath, were going to provide care and do what they could to keep those patients in good condition. But then once that pandemic kind of subsided and that tide kind of went back out, they had their chance to take a breath, And a lot of them put their hands up and said, we're done. We're worn out. We're going to find something else to do. And so you have that compounded with, we have an aging population, of which a lot of the healthcare providers are part of. So I think I saw a stat that almost a third of professional doctors and surgeons are 60 or older. So you're looking at a third of the industry that maybe they're still working now, but 5 years from now, they may not be. And then the additional challenge is with that mass exodus of care providers, you now have a much smaller pool to provide training and learning for the next generation. So you're having less nurses and less doctors come in to fill those gaps because there's not enough folks to train them and bring them up to speed to be able to provide care.
So you have these second and third order ripple effects that just compound the problem over time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So sounds like a really meaningful challenge here. So with what you're doing at Curabotics, for somebody who's not familiar with the company, you are installing automation and robotics within a hospital. But what does that look like? I mean, I think we've all seen like the science fiction movie with robotic surgeries. It sounds like you're solving a problem that it might be a little bit less kind of glamorous, but it's also very meaningful and something that probably every medical facility has to deal with. So could you walk through what it is you're doing at Curabotics and how you're kind of tackling that issue?
Sure. So we're trying to develop an offer for healthcare facilities that provides connected care through technology and AI, which means you may not even need to physically be in a hospital or a senior living building to get access to good care. Now, the first successful deployment we had with Curabotics was what we call our Nurse Assist robot system. And that's an autonomous mobile robotic system that is assisting nurses by reducing the amount of travel or steps they need to take in a day, which is in turn reducing their burnout or their exhaustion effects, right? So it's what I would call a supply chain or a logistics robotic system in which it's moving supplies and materials to and from directly to a patient room or taking things away from a patient room. And this can be anything from, we've started with clean supplies, linen, surgery packs, material packs, but it also includes nourishment or nutrition, such as snacks, cold orange juice or something like that, meals, we could do medication, so on and so forth. If you look at a hospital, it's very much a mini ecosystem of logistics and supply chain, right? Everything has a place it's got to go to or go from. It's got to be cleaned or it's got to be taken to waste. So just like we would do in a manufacturing facility, where we do a mass balance analysis, you can do the same thing in a hospital, and everything has to be moved and go to or from somewhere.
So I got a
Oh,
question.
go ahead, Matt.
You put some robots in for nurses?
Yeah.
Okay, so yep, you said you have Nurse Mom, I have Nurse Mom. I guess the only question that matters is, did it work and what did the nurses have to say about it?
Yeah, so it absolutely worked. We deployed a system and we started this as a pilot. So we started on one floor. And within the first 6 weeks of introducing the robotic system to that specific floor and that nurse, that team of nurses, we had a 96% adoption rate within the first 6 weeks, meaning that from the time we introduced it to the time all the nurses on that wing were using it, it took 6 weeks with some training. And then by the time that pilot ended and we parked the robots to assess with the hospital what's the next step, within a week, the hospital team or the nurse team was asking, when are they coming back? Why did you take them away from us? So they absolutely loved it. The metrics in the time study we did proved that we've saved the nurses 12% of distance traveled in a day. And so if you do that, scale that over each nurse on a shift, on a wing, over 3 shifts, you're basically impacting the number of nurses that are needed to provide care if they don't have to do more of those administrative and mundane tasks that the robot is supplementing.
Okay, kind of pivot. So the nurses liked it because they got mad when you took it away. I love that. I wonder if, my guess is they named them. That'd be my guess. The next question, okay, I'm the hospital administrator, I'm the operator, right? It's an administration driven industry. Is this hard? Like, does your system, does it connect to their existing systems that they've invested so much money in? And does it also connect to things like the building, which, I'm a robotics guy. If the building doesn't work with the robots, you're not destined for success. So does it connect on both ends?
Yeah. So Robert asked the question on why do we, I don't know that you use the word mundane, but why do we maybe tackle some of the less attractive tasks up front? And that's because we like to work with a hospital to help them develop a strategic plan for the future. And to do that, we start with some of the easier applications so that we can get stakeholder buy-in from teams like IT and OT, cybersecurity, administrators. And then as we're doing that, we're also developing the systems and the protocols that are needed to integrate with their building. So as you're scaling this, you start with a small pilot, and then you can grow to an entire automation strategy. And you can do that by integrating with fire systems, automatic doors. We custom design an integration with the elevator bank at the specific hospital we're working at. The robots we're using don't have fingers, and so they can't push a button to call a robot to get on or off or to determine what floor they want to go to. So we've developed a control system so that it can signal to the elevator controller that it needs to be picked up and it needs to go to such floor. So those are examples of some of the different systems. In a fire instance, you don't want a robot parking or stopping in front of a doorway because people need access to get out for life safety reasons. So we make sure all of that's considered. And then as we map out that first step of automation, get robots in, get them working with your facility, then we can start growing it. We start expanding from a pilot to more floors, more wings, more use cases, et cetera. So that's how we do it. And we usually like to look at that over probably a minimum of 5 years.
This is fascinating. So you make your nurses more productive and more efficient. You reduce the need overall for the number of nurses. So in the midst of this shortage nationwide post-COVID, it's not necessarily as dire of a situation if you're not able to find a replacement nurse when one of them leaves. Your nurses are also happier, so they're less likely to quit. And your patients are happier because their nurses are now spending more time on patient care instead of walking down to the supply cabinet or walking down to the medicine cabinet. So that's a win across the board.
Yeah, and you said it correctly. I am not in the business of trying to replace well-trained nurses who provide care with the robot, but I want to make sure there are enough well-trained nurses who can provide care and that other tasks can be done through automation. So that's what we're trying to do, is make sure the nurses can focus on the care they need to give.
That's amazing. That's a win across the board. So Kate, you mentioned all these things though, Matt, like you said, the integration with the building and IT systems and cybersecurity. I can't imagine it's easy to deploy new technology like this in a hospital setting. Could you walk through what that's like, just how you go about designing these, getting approval, working with the hospital systems? I'm assuming you probably have to work with some financial stakeholders here, whether it's insurance companies or Medicare, Medicaid. What does it look like to take this really useful new technology and actually get it deployed into a hospital setting so doctors and nurses are able to make use of it?
Yeah, and it's not dissimilar to some of the steps we take in our other industries, but you have that additional consideration of you're interacting with patients. In a manufacturing facility, your robotics are interacting with operators, right? So they're all folks that are trained to do the job that they're doing at that facility. In a hospital, you can train the nurses and you can train the facility staff, but the patients are coming and going. And so you have to have a lot of consideration for that safety effect. And so again, I mentioned we started this as a pilot, and that's usually the approach we take because we like to get stakeholder buy-in by doing demos and working with the team. Most hospitals we'll work with have some kind of a technology approval process we have to go through where we submit the technology, they need to review it. There's another reason we also set up our robot studio so that we had a showroom where hospital folks could come and take a look, understand the technology and how it works ahead of time. And then we'll also do custom features or custom specs for robotics as we need to, depending on the hospital. So in this situation, we had some narrow doors. They were worried about the robot being able to navigate out of that and not running into any patients. So we had to simulate that, and then we were able to work on redefining. And by spec, I just mean the vision system on the robot. Another feature is usually they use a camera to help with mapping and making sure they're in a safe place. And so the hospital was glad that we're using that for safety, but they were concerned about getting patients in the cameras. So we had to go through a process of confirming we weren't recording or storing anything, and it was simply just for navigation and for safety. So those are the types of steps we have to take. They usually have a team that has to go through and kind of check all the boxes for approval. And then once you get it through, then it's a lot easier to scale the system, because once the robots are deployed, then it's easier to build more and add to the system quite easily.
I wish
That's fascinating. Oh, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I wish Siri and Alexa could forget what they heard, right? So you train your robots to forget what they saw. I kind of wish everything around us did that.
I'm just glad when I'm walking around the hospital in one of those gowns, I'm not getting recorded. That gives me a lot more comfort. We should all feel happy about that.
I think the robot's more comfortable that way too.
Yeah, yeah.
For being fair. So eventually they're going to have feelings, right?
You got to think about the robot's feelings. Yeah, especially if you're giving it a name. I mean, it's pretty much a person at that point.
That's right. It's like a pet. So the next question I have on kind of the path of Curabotics. So you, on your intro, you talked about providing care in other places. You know, is Curabotics set up to be a platform where other technologies can plug in so that they're not doing this heavy integration to the hospital, but they can extend the care past the physical boundary of the hospital tower?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for the vision for Curabotics and what we'd love to see in the future is we would love to see the need of hospital footprints to shrink, where there's not as much care that needs to be done there, because we have not just nurse assist robots, but there are delivery robots that can deliver medication or labs either on a campus or outside of a campus. So you have externally rated robots that can do that. We also have handheld X-ray devices that require almost no training other than needing to know how to turn it on and point and shoot. They don't require PPE. A great example for that is use cases such as at a high school football field. If somebody gets injured and someone calls, an ambulance is on the way, but you don't know how long it's going to be, can we move the kid or not? We're not sure. If you have one of these devices on hand, you can take a few images through IA algorithms. It then has an app with your iPhone, and it'll quickly show you the images and then diagnose to a certain level of accuracy on, it's a break, or you can move them, or I would just wait and let a medical team get there. And then we also have facial scanning for metabolic detection. So you can have early detection on certain conditions, and you either can decide whether or not you even need to go for a medical facility, or maybe you just need a telehealth, in which case we can connect you with one of our robotic telehealth care providers.
Cool. So
that's awesome.
You're saying that when Curabotics does its job, I don't have to go to Quest anymore.
That'd be the goal. Yes, absolutely.
I'm here for that.
That's amazing. All right, Kate, last question here. I know we're coming up on time, but you're an engineer, you're a business leader in the healthcare industry. As you look at this industry, as you look at the future of American healthcare, what are you personally most excited about?
I think to what I said, I would love it if more people can get access to good care without having to worry about leaving their homes or being stressed about the cost to even get transportation. So I mentioned a few of the different devices or applications that we have. We're also partnered with a telehealth company, so we're working on bringing care to your home that can then be connected with some of the different offerings that I talked about, so that hopefully you're spending a lot less time traveling or in transit, and you're just getting care that you need. So that's my goal, is that we start developing a focus on, I think the biggest challenge is the funding for a lot of this deployment, right? There's a lot of hospital administrators that probably think, oh, automation would be great. Or maybe they don't have the education on what the opportunities are out there beyond, say, a Da Vinci surgical device. But there's a lot more opportunity for automation, and there's a lot of AI that can drive some of that with, minimal application.
This is fascinating. Kate McAfoose, founder of Curabotics, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate your time and all your insights here. This has been really valuable for everybody. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Paul Boynton joining us, who is the leader of a company called GoEco. Paul, thank you for joining us. Appreciate your time here.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Hi, Matthew.
So, Paul, you have a fascinating background. If you don't mind, if you could walk us through your background, what brought you to GoEco, and what exactly it is that GoEco does, because I'll be honest, Kodiak technology, I can get my head around industrial electric vehicles. Hospital robots, I can get my head around that. What you and the GoEco team are doing, though, is fascinating. And it's completely different from a lot of new technology that I think a lot of people like me are exposed to. So if you could walk us through your personal background and the really fascinating GoEco story, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So again, thanks, Robert, and enjoyed Kate and Mark's comments as well. That was great. I'm pumped up listening to what they had to offer. So, hey, I'm the former CEO of Rayonier Advanced Materials and Rayonier Inc. Rayonier Advanced Materials were the world's leading producer of highly purified wood fibers, so tree fibers. So, and when you get a really pure fiber from a tree, it can go into all kinds of things: shampoos as thickeners. It goes into pharmaceuticals, into kitchen sponges, high-speed tires, engine filtration. So lots of applications there. We also manage 25 million acres of timber in Canada. And with Rayonier Inc., we were the 6th largest landowner at the time when I ran the company. And again, just with 3 million acres of timberland under ownership, US and New Zealand. Prior to that, Robert, I was with 3M. So that was 23 years with Rayonier Advanced Materials. Prior to that, I was a decade at 3M. Ran their cleaning tools business, kitchen sponges, if you can think of that, Scotch-Brite, those Cello sponges. And also with them, I was also a forecaster for their performance chemicals business. So again, we'll get into this. That included a lot of their PFAS chemicals, and we'll talk about that for sure. So that's
a
my
four-letter
background.
word these days, but
What's that?
That's a four-letter word these days, PFAS.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll talk about
fascinating.
that. I'll get into a little bit. So what's GoEco, right? So GoEco is basically graphene oxide. We'll talk about what that is. It's a patented, sustainable, natural carbon-based solution for water and oil barrier enhancement in food packaging. So I said a lot there. It's an industry, if you think about food packaging, it's an industry looking for alternatives that different chemical barriers that create, right now it's full of chemicals and packaging and food packaging that have chemicals on it that are really a risk to the environment and risk to human health. And graphene oxide is a alternative to that, Robert. So it also provides great enhanced strength properties to paper packaging products. And so it has a lot of broad applications, even outside of food. Just think about general carton and corrugated box materials. And if you can enhance their strength and if you can enhance their performance characteristics. So great opportunities into the packaging area. And maybe if I can, if you want me, let me just take you through a little more of an example that may help to make it real, because you're right, it's complicated, right? So GoEco, right? So think of a small folding box that you get at a takeaway lunch order, right? So you're at the counter, you order this food, they put it in a box for you, you're walking out the store. So traditionally, all these type of boxes and almost all food packaging have a coating of PFAS chemicals, or forever chemicals, as they're often known. So this PFAS chemicals, they're very effective in keeping water and oil from the foods from soaking into the packaging and through the packaging. And they do this without a lot of cost, right? But what we've learned with better science, that these PFAS chemicals are very persistent in the environment. And we're now finding them in our water supply, we find them in plants and crops, and actually in almost every human at some level. And they're never going to go away. And there's a growing body of science out there that's found, potential adverse health impacts associated with PFAS, including liver damage, decreased fertility, and many other potentially cancer-causing issues. So, and we see that similarly in plastics and microplastics. And so a lot of US states and other countries have banned these PFAS chemicals, and the packaging industry is looking for a replacement for them. And that's where GoEco steps in, graphene oxide steps in as a sustainable natural carbon-based solution to help replace the void left by these PFASs. So I'll stop there. I said a lot, Robert. I'll let you go.
No, this is great. This is really helpful. So if I could summarize or attempt at summarizing,
Sure.
Food packaging is really important. Food packaging is what keeps food fresh. It allows it to be sold. It allows it to be delivered to you from a restaurant. But the way we package food right now, as we found out, is not necessarily safe for the environment or for consumers. It sounds like Go Eco has identified a better solution where you get the benefits of PFAS type food packaging without the downsides of the forever chemicals that are getting into the environment, getting into our water supply, and getting into our physical bodies as well. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, excellent, Robert. You
That's
got
great.
it
I
well.
was typing it into Chat GPT as we were going, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So first question. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I want to just remark that, Paul, since you started this important work, one of the things that I've tuned my ears to is this issue. And Robert and I spend a lot of time on X. Everybody on X is talking about plastics in the food and the environment. But the most important voice I've heard is moms. And moms are now conscious about this. They have little kids they're raising, and they're getting reports that all of their favorite comfort foods have plastic content inside the food. So they're putting it in the kids' bodies, and now we don't know if it leaves, right? I think we do know that some of it stays. So is Go Eco the type of solution that's revolutionary enough to start to take a bite at getting these plastics just out of the environment and out of our kids?
Yeah, totally, Matt. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is a big concern for moms, for consumers in general. And as a result, it's become a concern for retailers and packaged goods companies and packaging suppliers. Everybody has this concern, but they don't have a good answer. And one metric for me, I've been doing new product development pretty much for my whole career. And a lot of times, whether it's at 3M or at Rayonier, you bring a new idea to a potential partner or customer, and they're like, okay, I kind of see what you're talking about. We took this idea out to packaging companies and said, look, this is what it can do. It can potentially replace or supplant PFAS chemicals for food barrier. And they're like, let's go. Let's try it. Let's sign an NDA. Let's have it. So to me, I'm like, okay, this is not a push. This is a pull. And so there's a real need to what you're talking about, Matt, starting at the consumer level and then recognized by everybody in the supply chain that we need a better alternative, and there's not one out there. And we're trying to right now, working with Dr. Tim Way, trying to optimize this offering into the market. So we're working with many of the largest industrial packaging companies, food packaging companies in the world, and they're very eager to help us find a solution for them. Robert, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute there.
Yeah.
Rookie move. So Paul, that's fascinating. Really appreciate that. This is a huge problem to tackle though. I mean, as I look at my own kitchen, for example, we probably touch 20 different food products every day that are packaged in some way, shape, or form, whether it's an ingredient or prepackaged food. We have takeout food as well. I mean, you're talking about every American with multiple products every single day. For a company like Go Eco, what does it look like to actually go to market here and to gain adoption when you're talking about hundreds of millions, billions of products that are consumed on a monthly basis across America here?
Yeah, it is a great question because there are a lot of potential entry points for technology like Go Eco. We have found, though, that a lot of all these come together, all these consumers, retailers, everything you've got in your refrigerator are often coming together to a relatively small subset of packaging manufacturers, corrugated box manufacturers, people who make paper plates. That group is not that large. And those are the ones we are working with. We ranked the top ones. We made calls. They said, come on in, talk to our R&D group. And that's what we're doing now. And Robert, I think what we'll end up doing is working with them and then taking that message right back out to the consumer at some point, get it perfected here and take it to them. So we're either going to be a supplier to these packaging companies. We're going to be a partner to companies right now that used to make PFASs or now making barrier chemicals to help supplant them in terms of a license or a sale. So there's a lot of different potential, and right on down to, let's say, why aren't we working with a Starbucks to say Starbucks says, I'm using Go Eco in this cup, right? That makes total sense from what they're using today. So there's a lot of different levels that we can apply this technology and the communication to get this to market.
That's fascinating. And Matt, like you said, the mom trend here is so meaningful because I remember way back in the day, I used to go to bodybuilding.com, the website on the internet for people who work out. And these guys, this is back prior to probably 2010, they were talking about something called BPA. this chemical that was really bad. And I remember reading this, like, this kind of sounds like a conspiracy theory. You know, these are bros on the internet until about, I don't know, maybe 2018, 2020. I remember reading in the news that BPA was getting banned. And I thought back, like, these bodybuilders on the internet were 10 years ahead of time. And now, Matt, to your point, you and I are on X all the time. You have so many people talking about PFAS and microplastics, and it's spread throughout the entire ecosystem now to the point where my wife and I were in the Starbucks drive-through a couple weeks ago. She orders coffee, she pulls off the lid, looks at the inside of the cup, and she goes, "This is covered in plastic. Like, I don't want to go to Starbucks anymore because the cups are covered in PFAS forever chemicals." So, Paul, what you and the GoEco team are addressing here, it is a meaningful problem that for which there's a lot more awareness now than there was a few years ago. It's not just a niche group of people. This seems to be everybody, especially parents and anybody who's concerned at all about the environment or their physical health.
So Paul, I've got a
go ahead,
question
Matt.
to follow that up. And I agree, Robert, have you tested it? Have you made any product, and can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we have tested it. We're working with a leading university in the U.S. that does a lot of pilot scale testing. We're working with, as I said, quite a few different industry players, including a food tableware company, Matt. What we're seeing in our lab tests, what we're seeing in the pilot tests, we're seeing a product that does enhance oil barrier properties. It does enhance water barrier properties, and it adds strength, right? So what can that do? If you add strength, you don't need as much fiber. If you don't need as much fiber, you're not having much product go through, reduce landfill. So we are getting that database together and that knowledge together on how to apply it, how to work with the other sustainable barrier chemicals they're trying to use today, and how do we optimize that for the packaging company and the food retailer and the consumer. But we're having success, Matt. We're seeing some good results.
That's awesome. So lots to be optimistic for, and the moms think you should be done yesterday, right?
Yeah.
They want it now. So you said it reduces fiber. Does that mean it also saves a tree?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It could reduce the usage there, although I've got to say our trees are sustainably grown that almost everybody uses in the United States, so that's a good news. But it does reduce the consumption of that. It can therefore help on the amount of recycling material that goes out there, the amount of landfill material. So the benefit is obviously quite substantial.
And then when this paper food packaging that goes to the landfill or the recycling, and just a reminder for the audience, if it's dirty, it goes to landfill. If it's clean, it goes to recycling. What happens to the GoEco product?
So everything we know and everything we see that the GoEco product should be fully compostable, so it should break down, which again is part of the problem with some of the solutions they're coming up with now that replace the PFAS. They're not there yet. Same problem with microplastics or plastics. We think we hit that head on and have a fully recyclable, a product that breaks down in the environment, which is what you want. You're starting with something very natural. It's going to end up with something very natural.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Well, Paul, this is fascinating. Thank you for your time. Thank you for all the insights here. You've given us a lot to think about, but love what you and the GoEco team are doing, and really looking forward to seeing this on grocery store shelves in the near future.
Yeah, us too. We can't wait. We're excited. We're pumped up. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
So, Matt, just a closing thought here. We talked to three really capable, really knowledgeable people here. What I love about each of these three conversations is each of them started with a major problem. You've got Kodiak Technology talking about clean energy and power grid sustainability and industrial electric vehicles. You've got Curabotics talking about making hospitals more efficient and making nurses more productive. You've got GoEco talking about food packaging and forever chemicals. All these companies are starting with these major problems, but they've built a tangible solution, something that actually works in the market here. And on top of that, there's a win for all these different stakeholders. If you look at GoEco, this is a win for airports. It's a win for the federal government. It's a win for passengers who might not get stranded at the airport without power, without their Cinnabon. If you look at Curabotics, it's a win for nurses. It's a win for patients. It's a win for people in small towns who might not otherwise have access to healthcare. If you talk about GoEco, it's a win for consumers. It's a win for moms. It's a win for food companies and for the environment, because like you said, you've got fewer trees that are going to be cut down. So I don't really have a question there. I just love seeing all these different companies with
Yeah.
really smart people solving these really big issues, creating mutual benefit all over society and all over the economy. It's amazing to see.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And the piece that I love is, so I think people like you and me, Robert, we're now coming to this consciousness that we are reshoring. We are gonna make things in America again. You know, we're gonna begin the process of restoring the industrial base, right? And what I'm seeing a lot in the public media is this question of like, who is gonna do it? We don't make enough engineers. We don't make enough builders. We don't make enough problem solvers, right? And I think in the financial markets, we've done a good job over the last 20 or 30 years of making SaaS developers, for example, or high-end strategy consultants, right? Those are areas where we are well supplied. But
I feel a little bit called out there, but please go on. That's
well,
I'm kidding.
I didn't say $20 consultants. I said, so you know what? In fact, as far as I know, we only have one $20 consultant in the whole country. So that you've got
there's probably a reason for that.
But I think what I'm encouraged by is we do have the human resource, we do have the people, and we do have the innovation potential to get it done. But it is going to take a kind of a realignment of capital and focus to say, who are these next leaders that are going to help us build this? Right. And it probably isn't some of the incumbents that we see on TV all the time. It's probably the next generations like Marc and Paul and Kate that are seeking to build something. And Paul, as a compliment that I called you next generation. But that to me, I think we have the people. It's a matter of building enough community that we can find and empower those people to go get it done.
That's awesome. That's such a good way to put it. You've got the next generation stepping up to build things here in America and solve major problems for people here in America and across the globe. So there's nothing better than that. There's a lot to be excited about. To our audience, thank you for joining us. We are privileged to have you here. We really appreciate your time. If you want to find out more about any of these companies, please go to www.cr.fund. Learn more about Chang Robotics, learn more about the fund that we're putting together here, learn more about all our portfolio companies. But thank you all for joining. Matt, thank you for leading this. Kate, Marc and Paul, thank you for joining us. This has been a fascinating conversation. Really appreciate everybody's time.
All right. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.